Hi everyone, again. This is the second part of my introduction to Illustrator and the drawing tools. We left off here with me drawing with the pen tool. Other things that you should know about the Illustrator interface when you're drawing is that you can modify artboards by going to the bottom of the toolbar and clicking on the artboard tool. And if I zoom out using the zoom tool to down on the very bottom of the toolbar, you can hold Option and the toolbar becomes a minus, or you can go to the top of your window and you should, when you're on the zoom tool, you might see a minus. Not seeing it right now, but if I hold Option, it becomes a minus and I can zoom out and notice that you can see all three artboards. You can choose the artboard and modify the artboard by going and clicking with the artboard tool on the artboard that you're using, and that means that you're on that artboard. And then if you do, for instance, Command 0, it will show you that artboard. So you fit that artboard into the window. The hand tool moves the window that you're working on inside and moves around. As I said, the zoom tool zooms in. Notice that I just zoomed in. You can also move it just like a move in and out. So to the right makes the zoom get bigger, to the left makes the zoom get smaller. That's probably better than holding Option even. So zoom in, zoom out with the zoom tool. As I said, the fill box is this one. The stroke is the one that has a hollow center, an empty center, and you can switch those by going to the arrow to up a little bit upwards and to the right of the two boxes. You can switch them back and forth. Notice I just switched them. And yeah, that's about it. If you want to take delete tools or add tools, you can go to the edit toolbar, which is the ... at the bottom, and it'll bring up a list of tools. Going quickly across and talking about the menus in Illustrator, you'll see under the Illustrator menu, you have About Illustrator, you have the Preferences of Illustrator. And one preference that I always talk to students, when you go to the preferences, you'll see general, or the whole list of preferences. And if you go to general, notice that you bring up a lot of general preferences. On the left, you can go down and up, guides, units, type, selection and anchor display. I also tell students to make sure that scale, strokes, and effects is checked, because when you make things smaller, bigger, it's important to have scale, strokes, and effects checked. It actually should be the default, but I don't think it is. You'll notice that now in selection and anchor display, there's a rubber band and it follows you around. It kind of bothers me when I'm using the pen tool. So I uncheck it for the pen tool and the curvature tool. And there are a few other things. User interface. You can choose how dark or light your user interface. I use a traditionally light one, but I notice that my students like to go darker often. So I'll leave it on that one so you can see what it looks like. So the whole interface, and it can be darker or lighter. As I said, I kind of grew up with a lighter one, so I feel more comfortable. Go back in, go to preferences, and I'll go to user interface again, and this is what we see, and make it a little lighter because that's what I'm used to. So in File, you have File New, Open, Close, Save, Save As. You should know what those mean. It was recommended that you know how to use a computer to be in this class. In Illustrator, Place is an important command because that's how you place a pixel image. And we will be placing pixel images JPEG on the bottom layer often, and then tracing over it for placement of shapes. So that's about it. If you want to change your document setup or change the document color mode, it's at the bottom of File. So in document setup, you can change your artboards. You can edit the artboards. That's where they are. So if you want to change the size of one of your artboards, and you can do that individually. You can change one artboard size. You can do it in Edit Artboards. Under Object, this is, in my opinion, the most important menu in Illustrator, because Illustrator is an object program. So you want to be able to do things, particularly to objects. That's what it is. So transform, move, rotate, reflect, scale, shear, arrange, bring to front, bring forward, send backwards, send to back. Group, a really important command. If you've made a couple of different objects and you don't want them to move away from each other, I'll show you. Let's say I've made an object and I want it to, I'm going to make an ellipse here. I'll actually hold Shift so it becomes a circle, and then I'm going to fill it with a color. So that now I've changed the stroke, but not the fill. So I have to make the fill on top in order to change the fill. Now I'm going to use the black selection tool, move it so it's just touching that little point there on my line. What if I want these to be not move in relation to each other ever? So I will make this a little bit, I'll make the stroke a little bit bigger. I'm adjusting things, make it 6 points. Now I like that. I want that always to stay like that. Yes, so I'm going to give this shape a no stroke. So I'm going to go to the stroke and say no stroke, just blue, and I want to make sure. You can go in and check it out and see if it's just barely touching, but I want these to always stay that way in relation to each other. I can use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move it down, and you can zoom in to make sure that it's barely just touching if that's what you want. Okay, so then I want them to stay that way in relation to each other. You can either draw a marquee around both of these or shift click. So hold one, select one, and then shift and click on the other. And now they're both selected. Go to Object, Group, and they will always be grouped until you ungroup them. So there's an ungroup command also. You can also lock objects on the screen, lock the selection, lock other layers. You can lock in different ways. So there's a lock command if you don't want it to move from that particular place on the screen. But right now, I'm just concerned that these two things are locked to each other. So I did Object, Group. You can, and I will be showing this later, you can expand objects. And that means that you have made them into editable shapes. So that is kind of a complicated concept for later, but you can do that. And you can do other things to paths, shapes, patterns, blends, all of these things. Live paint and image trace we'll be talking about later. We have an exercise devoted to that. And clipping mask is a good thing to know about, and hopefully I'll get to that during the class too, but maybe not. Type, the type menu we won't be using much because this is not a graphic design class. I used to include a little bit of graphic, but work in graphics, but I don't do that anymore. So you don't, all you need to know with the type is that yes, you can go to the type tool and simply click any place. Lorem ipsum is Greeking, is garbage text that comes up. There's text that doesn't make sense, but I'm going to type my name, and then if I select, you can make that type bigger or smaller. The control bar above will change, and you'll be able to make by going to character, you can change the size, the typeface, whatever you want of the type. So notice that by changing the size, clicking on the up menu, I'm changing the size of the type. And the other characteristics of the type are in this palette called character. Also notice character, and there's a paragraph. So if you type more, if you put in more type, you can have left align, right align. There are other attributes here of the type that are available. but we're not using type as much as drawing and painting tools in this class. So select again is only available when you have something that can be selected or not selected or deselected. So these are all, you can deselect in this, you can select the inverse, and some of these are useful. I don't use that menu too much. Effect, we're not doing too much with effects in this class, but if we were, I would suggest using the Illustrator ones for Illustrator, for the Illustrator application. View is really important. You need to know that we are going to be working in preview, not outline view. If you go to outline view, you will see that everything becomes an outline. Often students say, Miss Khan, I can't see any color. There are no attributes of my objects anymore. So that is because you're in the wrong view. There are only two views in Illustrator, preview and outline view. And it's odd, they show you the one that you're not in. So if you want to change to the other one, you go to the top of the view menu and change it. These zoom in, zoom out, you can do that in the menus. And you can bring up the perspective grid that is in under view, oddly enough. Rulers are quite important. So you should know that rulers are under view. So show rulers. And it gives you a top ruler and a left ruler that you can pull guides from. So that's kind of important to know if you want to pull some guides to line things up or whatever you want to use the guides for. So at the bottom, you can, there's some other commands, show grid, for instance, which is useful sometimes. It gives you a small grid that you can draw on top of. In window, these are all the palettes, and we'll be talking about some of them during this class, but all the palettes are under window. So that's referring to the palettes that you see right now on the right-hand part of my screen. The ones that I have up right now are checked. So you see that color is checked, stroke is checked, and if you go further down, just by going to the arrow at the bottom of your of the list here, and it'll automatically scroll down for you. Notice that swatches should also be up. I thought I had swatches up. So that should also be checked. And there they are. Okay. I suggest that you pull your palettes that you're using all the time out from the palette dock. There's the palette dock. You may not even have a palette dock open. So you have to make sure in window that you start using, go down and start using some of these, but mine are open or available to me on the right. And you can put them together in an order that pleases you. I'm on a laptop, so I like things to be as small as possible. So I'm putting these into tabs. Color and swatches right now are in tabs. And I like stroke to be available at the same time without being in tabs. Then you can make it smaller or bigger by going hide options or show options. And you have the palettes that you're using constantly. You can move that right over, constantly available to you right on the screen, and able to be moved around as you work. So the reason for that is when you click on a palette in the palette dock, you can only use one at a time. So let's say I was trying to see what I've been doing, appearance. If I click on another one, such as layers, the appearance pops back in. So you can only use one, and often they're grouped in groups, but even so, you can only use one at a time from the palette dock. So I have the ones that I use all the time stuck together in a floating group outside the palette dock. So that's about it, I think, for menus and palettes. I'll be talking much more about the palettes and the specific palettes. The palettes are specific to the tools. So when you have a certain tool up, such as gradient, you also need to have the gradient palette up. And as I show you how to use gradients in exercise 2, I will also mention that you should be on the gradient tool and using the gradient palette. So if I pull the gradient palette out, I click on the word gradient, and I can expand it then with the little arrows at the top of the palette, and I can stick this in, for instance, maybe with color swatches. So now they're in tabs. And I see that I can now control my gradient and also be on the gradient tool. So be using those things, the tool and the palette simultaneously. And I'll be showing you that for exercise 2. But the tools that you should know for exercise 1 that you're doing this week, that you're starting this week, are the pencil and the pen for drawing, and some of the other tools that are available to you, such as the selection tools on top and the ways to move the window around at the bottom. Thank you.